is Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by the WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman. How are you, sir?
Very, very well, Danny. Thank you so very much. Very happy to see you.
You're just coming off the latest WBC convention out in Acapulco in Mexico. Sadly, I wasn't there. I was otherwise engaged, but it looked like a great event. Just your reflections on that.
It was a sensational convention. I'm very satisfied, very happy. We had over 1,600 delegates from 112 countries, 84 champions, around 115 media outlets, but most importantly, the unity that was lived, the great moments to see someone from Africa next to a Japanese, next to a Mexican, to a British, to see the camaraderie, the so hard work that happened in Acapulco. Acapulco is a beautiful resort, but still everybody was in the meetings. And when it was time to work, it was really time to work. We got many things accomplished. And then when it was time to enjoy, we had beautiful cocktail and 2 great dinners. The talent show was sensational. The cliff diving spectacle and so many things that it was a memorable convention, and so many moments that will remain in our minds and our hearts for a lifetime.
It sounds very tough, Maurizio, a bit like my recent boxing trip to Abu Dhabi. But I'm sure work was done as well, just as it was on my trip, of course. Some of the fights that were ordered by the WBC at the convention were particularly mouth-watering. I'm thinking of, Ruiz against Wilder, for example, Spence against Thurman. Lots of great fights. I've seen a little bit of criticism. I was looking earlier. Eddie Hearn spoke to Boxing Scene, and he said you're an amazing president, which is, very nice to hear, of course. But he said it's kind of like being a fantasy football manager, in that you can pick out these fights, but very few of them might actually come to fruition. Is there much more the WBC can do to make these fights happen, apart from just order them? Because then you've got different broadcasters and promoters that best intentions of you guys tend to get in the way.
Well, we are not promoters, and boxing is the only sport that is different from any other, in which, let's say, we are the league of the sport, okay? But if you have FIFA, UEFA, the NFL, basketball, baseball, all those structures are for those leagues to control the business side of the sport. In boxing, we have absolutely nothing to do with the business side in order to keep an absolute line from the conflict of interest. So it's the promoters who have the control of the business. And the promoters, they rely on their platforms, television networks, the sponsors, their sites. So there are many great fights that, as you mentioned, the promoters' conflicts get in the way for not happening. But we do what we have to do, and if those fights do not happen, it is not the WBC's fault. Many of the great fights in history have been ordered by the WBC or have been led by the WBC platform. So I feel very comfortable. We are completely open and transparent, and all those meetings were in the open floor. Everyone could speak. Matchroom was represented by Kevin Rooney. Promoters had their representatives there. So we addressed every single division, and we ended up with those fights that had been ordered. I'm very excited for all of them. If some of them do not come to fruition, then we'll see what happens down the line. But I sincerely feel very, very comfortable and happy with the work that we have done.
Have you noticed over the last, say, 5 years that fewer of these fights do come together because of the broadcaster situation? Something you have no control over, but there are more broadcasters competing in boxing space than ever before.
Yeah, that is a fact, but that has always been the case. There was a time, it was Showtime and HBO. In Mexico, Televisa and Azteca. I'm sure in the UK, there's a rivalry, Sky Sports and BT. So it's a natural thing that we have to cope with that. We do our job. We order the fights that are the ones that could lead to the great emotions for the fans. And hopefully they will happen down the line. Pacquiao Mayweather took so long to happen. They were not at their prime. But there have been so many fights. Everybody expected Spence to fight Crawford. Something happened. I have no idea what it. But I look at the great. We had a great year. So many great fights and so many good things to talk about. Katie Taylor Serrano, Clarissa Shields in the UK selling out the O2 in an all-women's card. Tyson Fury knocking out Dillian White in front of 94,000. Japan with Inoue and Murata with sold-out stadiums. Dallas Cowboys stadiums sold out with Errol Spence. And we have Chocolatito Estrada coming up. We have this Saturday Prograis against Cepeda. It's a very good time for boxing. There's many great idols, many potential great fights in several weight categories. So I feel very, very positive about the sport.
Now, another thing that caused some headlines coming out of the convention, certainly in the UK, was the removal of Conor Benn from the welterweight rankings. Not a big surprise given everything that's going on. I watched your interview with Rob Tebbett of ID Boxing, who was out in Acapulco. I didn't watch all of it, I've got to be honest. I think it was 2 hours long. But I watched the main points of which I was most interested. And you talked about there being a separate WBC investigation into the Conor Benn situation. I just wanted to ask, first of all, is that investigation related to both tests that reported adverse findings, or just the one that was associated with the WBC clean boxing program?
Well, we have the clean boxing program, has been in existence for 7 years. It's flawless. It has a protocol, and every single case is different. So if one case from one fighter cannot relate to another case to another fighter, so we do an independent investigation of each independent case, because there's different substances, different facts, different situations. And that is the case with Conor Benn. We are doing that investigation. Of course, there are legalities that have to be taken into consideration, but we believe in the innocence of fighters until they're proven guilty, and we are in that process right now. But the protocol calls for the fighter to be placed in the not available section of the rankings.
Now, you're obviously investigating the clean boxing program test, which I believe was the first test that has been reported. There was subsequently another test leading up to the fight with Chris Eubank Jr. that never happened, where there was another adverse finding reported. Now, although you might not investigate that specifically, will the result of that test have any bearing on your initial investigation?
Yeah, I mean, anything that has to do with a situation is considered, is taken into consideration. We investigate what happened prior, during, after, regarding nutrition, regarding, we're going to have a meeting, virtual or in person, as we have done in the past with the fighter and or his representatives. So it's a process that we have to follow.
And there, in your interview with Rob, which was, I think, around a week ago now, you talked about the need for hearings and whether the fighter opted to have the B sample opened or not. What's the very latest on that from their team or Ben's team? Is a hearing been scheduled? Have they requested the B sample to be opened? Has anything come back to you guys from their side?
I must apologize. I took last week off. I'm a little bit behind a lot of work. So I don't know exactly the status, but I know I am certain that it is being addressed. And we have had communications with the representatives of Ben. So I can tell you it is being addressed. and we will certainly update as soon as we have something to share.
Without getting into specifics, can you give us an idea of a case like this? What are the possible outcomes at the end of an investigation? I'm sure there's quite a few different ones, but just a few of what could take place.
Well, I got into Rob. I'm sure you saw. He insisted so much in trying to get. We do not speculate. We don't like to speculate. It can lead to wrong interpretations. I invite you to read the protocol. It clearly says the possibilities of the different outcomes of an adverse finding.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. We talked earlier about Errol Spence and Keith Thurman being ordered. Great fight though it is, but as you alluded to, I think fans were hoping, as they have for a number of years now, that Spence would fight Terence Crawford, who's the only other major world champion in the division. It seems like that fight fell through once again, this time due to what we talked about earlier, some issues with the broadcasters or the promoters. How long did you wait before you knew that fight wasn't going to happen, before you decided to order the Thurman fight?
Until the last day, when Crawford announced his fight against Avenician, that's when the WBC decided to install that. But the reality, we cannot order Crawford to fight because he's the WBO champion. There was a precedent where we tried with the best of intentions and we ordered our champion to fight precisely Kovalev, who was a WBO champion.
Against Adonis Stevenson.
Against Adonis Stevenson, and everything was good, everything was great. And then Kovalev pulls out. So there's no consequences because the only thing that happened is that the fight didn't take place. So in an order fight, if one fighter pulls out, he loses his position, his rights. In this case, he only had the right to fight for a unified title. So it's a complicated. We have a reciprocity and respect with the three other organizations, with the WBO, with the IBF, and the WBA. We do have respect. We try to communicate. Of course, each organization has their own rules, their own agenda, their own orders, etc., etc. But we have met and we are trying to do the best to keep unified champions, to address the mandatories that a unified champion has. And it's a complicated topic, but we are working. We're trying to do the best for the sport and for the fans.
I guess it's a similar situation with Artur Beterbiev, who fights Anthony Yarde in January. I know Dmitry Bivol has expressed a desire to unify the light heavyweight division, but Beterbiev now has a mandatory obligation pressing in Callum Smith. And I believe you've said that that will take precedence over a unification. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The WBC had the agreement with the WBO, and Top Rank knew perfectly that we collaborated and allowed Yarde, even though it was postponed, we allowed that fight to go, and but with the understanding that Callum Smith has to fight the winner. And unless there is something different, but that's the WBC order. We will not move from that unless there's an agreement that Callum Smith accepts.
Now, talking of Beterbiev, I know this was something that was raised as well in that all Russian and Belarusian fighters have now been removed from the WBC rankings due to the ongoing situation in Ukraine, which again, I think will get plenty of public support. I don't think many people would dispute what you guys have decided to do. I think it'd just be good to get from you some specifics regarding who would be considered Russian and who wouldn't. I know Beterbiev, his children have Canadian citizenship. He's been based there for a number of years. What are the actual kind of rules on that situation?
Well, Beterbiev is billed as Canadian. He has been living in Canada for 15 years, has Canadian passport, residency. His children were born there. his boxing license is from Canada. A Venetian, for example, he was before listed as Russian, but he's from Armenia, has Armenian passport, and he was considered like that by the WBC. So Kovalev is listed as USA because of those same scenarios. He lives in Los Angeles, etc., etc., etc. So we are not in politics. We are in sports. Ukraine has no boxing because they are being invaded by Russia. And the WBC position is until Ukraine can reestablish their boxing activity, we will not entertain or allow Russia and Belarus to have boxing activity under WBC. We are pro-peace. We are very saddened by what is going on. But as I said, we are not into politics. We are into sports. We are very sad for the boxing community in Russia and Belarus. We have many friends, trainers, fighters, promoters, ring officials, executives, and it's part of our family. But this is a decision that was taken by the world. We're the voice of the world. And at this time, we're going to continue with this situation. If there's any case that a fighter wishes to be reviewed regarding their eligibility, we have a process to address it. So basically, it is residence. It is to understand the facts of the specific situation. But we are completely in favor of peace and in favor of life coming back to normal in the Ukraine.
Now we have a WBC World Heavyweight title fight. So
that's my wife.
Yeah,
you're live in the Zoom interview, my darling.
We have a WBC Heavyweight title fight taking place next week here in the UK between Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora. While I'm sure you're looking forward to that fight, is there an element of disappointment that it's not a fight with Anthony Joshua, as I'm sure a lot of people hoped?
Not at all, because that would be a betrayal to our champion. Tyson Fury immediately reached out and called out, and there were negotiations to fight Anthony Joshua. He reached out and called out to fight Usyk. Usyk made it clear that he could not fight before February or March next year. The Joshua led everyone to believe that it could be a reality, and Fury tried his best to give the fans another blockbuster. He's coming from fighting Wilder, White. So for anyone to criticize the champion is not fair. Of course, we all want always the best fight possible, but reality and history shows that it is not like that. It is not possible. It's like if we wanted every game from Liverpool to be the best game of the season. You have a season and you have different teams and you play different. So every sport does not have back after back after back after back. Of course, Tyson Fury being the major attraction in the boxing world, we all want him to be fighting the best possible opponent at all times. But what he's doing is perfectly normal, perfectly within the rules. He's fighting a ranked fighter, and it's interesting. It's a third fight. It's the first time a trilogy in a championship fight happens. So I'm happy for them. I mean, I will be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to the UK. I'm going to be happy, and I'll be with our champion, Tyson Fury.
We look forward to seeing you there. Can you understand, though, and you said, fans always want someone like Fury to fight the best available opposition. Can you understand some of the criticisms, particularly that it's someone that Fury has fought twice before? Because no one disputes Chisora is a viable challenger. He's just beaten Kubrat Pulev. He definitely deserves a title shot. But I think it's more that he's already faced Chisora twice in the past. and those two fights were pretty one-sided.
Well, it's just going round and round. Chisora is a fighter who has good build, has a punch, and it's going to be an interesting match between two British. So if we look at all the fighters on front, most of them are high-level fighters that are not easy to land a negotiation in a short period of time. That is my interpretation. I believe Chisora is a challenger because there was a possibility of making a negotiation. But as I said, I'm very excited. For a reason, he has sold, I believe, 60,000 tickets, or I don't know if more. But I mean, there has to be interest, and Fury is a major player in boxing. So I, of course, support him.
Now, excuse me, just before I let you go, I was looking on your social media earlier, and you were harking back to 1986, when Mike Tyson, of course, won the WBC heavyweight title, becoming in the process the youngest world heavyweight champion in history. And you'd met Mike. You were flown over with your father, Jose, of course, and met Iron Mike Tyson on that trip. Just tell us a little bit about that.
It was amazing. I was going to high school in Massachusetts. A friend of mine invited me to his home for Thanksgiving. It was a holiday. And then 2 days before, he says, I'm sorry, you cannot come to me. With my parents were going somewhere else. So I'm stuck in school, all alone. I called my dad and I said, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. He says, he sent me a ticket. I flew from Boston to Las Vegas. And it was when Mike Tyson fought Berbick. So I met Mike Tyson at the weigh-in, young kid, 20 years old. I was 16. And after the fight, we hung out a little bit and enjoyed and became friends immediately. I call him Miguel since that day. So he has been a very dear personal friend of me personally, of my father. Of course, he was like a son. But Mike Tyson has a very special place in our hearts always.
As a 16-year-old boy hanging out with a 20-year-old Mike Tyson, how much of that trip can you actually talk about from after the fight?
Oh, it was nice because, I was born in a home of boxing without knowing it. We would come back from school, my brothers and myself, and there would be Muhammad Ali or Don King, Bob Arum, Chavez, Duran, Sugar Ray, having lunch at our house or meeting with my father at the house. My father always used the house to invite the guests as a way of showing hospitality. So we were always in very intimate touch with great superstars or with humble newcomers. So it has been always like that for us. Meeting Tyson was nice, and it's more exciting now than then because now Tyson, you know who Mike Tyson is. So he's very humble. He's a very nice friend, close, impersonal, and he's a dear, dear person. He's a good guy.
And have you continued that tradition that your father had of using your house, inviting the superstars there, so your kids get to see them as well as when they're growing up?
Yes, I have a great wife and my kids. For example, last week we had a beautiful dinner with the Fundora family. It's the father and the mother and the kids. And Fundora, Gabriela, she cooked. So we like to have that close personal relationship with the fighters because this is a family. And, the last thing I like about boxing is what happens in the ring. I love everything that happens outside the ring, the personal stories, the dreams that go through, the accomplishments, the problems that you are able to participate and resolve. And this is without a doubt, the convention was the reassurance of how important the WBC is for all of us, regardless of what you are, if you are a media, if you are a fan, if you're a promoter, manager, trainer, a boxer, a doctor, a supervisor, judge, referee, it's a whole family that cares about so many different things outside of what happens inside the ring. So it's a story that many people don't know, and many don't care to know, because fans, they want to see the fights, but there's so much behind the fights that it's a thrilling situation that we go through every time.
And just finally, I could see the World Cup taking place just in the screen to your right. We saw it's obviously in Qatar. We saw Saudi Arabia pull off a historic victory over Argentina as well. Is it kind of a reflection of boxing at the moment in the Middle East region is starting to gain in prominence?
It's a whole world. It's a very smaller world than before. There are no more giants. There are no more low possibility teams. Japan just beat Germany, and Saudi Arabia beat Argentina. So it's a small world, and football has grown so much worldwide. The ability, the technique, the coaching strategy, it's now more different. So anyone can win, and that's the greatness in the sports. In boxing, one punch can change everything. A humble young kid from Africa come out and become a Suma Nelson or Macabu or Iquarte, or a young poor Mexican kid can become Chavez or Canelo. So it's a beautiful sport. Sports in general are a great way for humanity to find the much needed distractions, illusions, passions that our day-to-day bring. So that's why the World Cup is very important. The boxing is very important, and everything that has to do with sports is very positive.
Mauricio, it's been an absolute pleasure. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely, Danny. I hope to see you there.
Take care. Speak soon.